Hello, cinefans. I'm Kendall Kruver, and this is Watching Classic Movies. My guest, Luis Reyes, is the author of Viva Hollywood, the legacy of Latin and Hispanic artists in American film. We talked about the changing representation of this varied and vibrant group in Hollywood, and artists from the popular to the underseen, while also celebrating the fact that Latin and Hispanic people in film have long been an integral part of the industry, with many towering accomplishments and innovations to offer. Welcome, Luis. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Kendall. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your audience. So thank you.
Well, I really enjoyed this book, and one of the things that I found especially nice about it was that it was so full of variety of people, films, time periods. And it got me to thinking about how there's so much variety in among Latin and Hispanic people. It's black, brown, white. It's people from all over the world. And one thing in one of your books, I had noticed that you weren't really aware of that diversity, when you were younger, and it was something that was kind of a dawning awareness for you.
Right, because I grew up in New York.
Yeah.
In the 50s. I'm a baby boomer. So in my neighborhood, as far as Latinos were concerned, it was just Puerto Rican, Dominicans, and Cubans. And that was it as far as Latinos were concerned, even though there were probably more diversity than that. But that's, as a kid, that's what I was aware of. And that was in my neighborhood, even though there were other groups. There were Italian Americans, there were Irish, there was a Jewish synagogue right behind my house. So we did have a diversity of different cultures. But as far as the Latino, that's all I knew until I got to college. And then I realized, oh my gosh.
And how did that change your view of the movies in that regard?
Well, movies were always movies for me. It didn't change. It changed some of the feelings of authenticity. Okay. But it just helped me to appreciate my own culture and the other Hispanic cultures, where I realized we're not a monolith. It's a diversity of cultures, but also Puerto Ricans are American citizens. Mexican Americans have been here before the Mayflower. Okay, we had the Santa Fe Trail, between Mexico City and Santa Fe, the northern provinces of, the Americas. St. Augustine, Florida. So the Hispanic presence, and we're not even talking about the Mayan and the Aztec cultures and the Native American cultures, and also the African Americans who were brought over as slaves into the Caribbean islands. So there's a big diversity within the Latino experience in America. And that's what I was most interested in, because there are plenty of books on Latin American cinema. There's plenty of books on Mexican cinema. But when I first came to California, there was no documentation, really, for the most part, on American Latino participation in Hollywood.
And you have had the opportunities to speak to many of these people who have been able to provide some representation in the industry. I think the first thing that got my attention in the book was that lovely photo of you and Cesar Romero together.
Yes. When I first came to LA, I joined the Latino organization Nosotros, that came out of which means we the people, that came out of the civil rights and the Chicano movement of the late 60s, early 70s. Ricardo felt that there were too many negative portrayals of Latins in films, and also he wanted to create more opportunities. As he said, I don't mind if Eli Wallach can play a better Mexican bandit than me, but judge me on my talent, not on my last name. So through this organization, there was a banquet that was held every year to honor Latinos in the film industry, or people who had helped Latinos in the film industry. So I got to meet a lot of the stars, and we weren't so polarized then as we are now. So everybody joined in to help in a good cause. So I got to meet, Ricardo, Cesar Romero, Gilbert Rowland, Rita Hayworth, Ann Miller, Robert Stack. I mean, people, non-Latinos, John Wayne, Joel McCrae, John Hall, who appeared opposite Maria Montez in a lot of the Arabian Nights,
Right.
Cobra Women films. So I got to meet a lot of the people, and they would tell stories. And I said, God, nobody's recording this. Nobody is writing this down. It's nowhere to be found. And if we don't start recording our own history, nobody else will.
Yes. So among these many people that you spoke to, who stands out to you? What really, is bold in your memory?
They're all bigger than life.
They're all bigger than life.
I mean, they were just the way they were on screen to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Ricardo Montalban was the gentleman.
Yes.
He personified that. Cesar Romero was class. He had class, stature. He was old Hollywood. Anthony Quinn was exactly bigger than life. He was Zorba. He was, Abdul from Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, he was, Emiliano Zapata's brother. I mean, he was Zorba the Greek. I mean, his performances were so filled with humanity that everybody thought that they identified with him. They thought, oh, he's Greek. Oh, he's Italian. He's
Yes.
Mexican. Everybody identified. Oh, he's Arab. Identified with him as they made him part of their own. They identified with him.
I mean, if there is an everyman in Hollywood, I would definitely say it's Quinn.
Yeah, I mean, he was the most, of his generation. I think he was the most important because he was an international star.
Yes,
And the length of his career. I mean, he goes back to, working with Cecil B. DeMille. I mean, he worked with Anna May Wong. I mean, in early films. I mean, his career, it was incredible. He was with Errol Flynn. He played the Indian chief, and they died with their boots on. So, I mean, he worked with John Wayne, and Back to Bataan. He played a Filipino resistance leader. I mean, we could talk for hours just on Anthony Quinn.
Just a whole episode on Quinn. And it would be brilliant too. What was it like to talk to Rita Hayworth?
When I talked to Rita Hayworth, I just really barely said hello to her.
Yeah.
As Ricardo put it, she was ill at the time. Okay.
We're talking the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, she was very nice, but there wasn't much of a conversation with her. Yeah, unfortunately.
Another woman that I found you had some interesting talks with was Rita Moreno. She really seemed to have her mind wrapped around the industry and what it held for her and kind of how to survive.
Yeah, I mean, she did. She worked in everything. One of the things she said was, even though it was difficult, she never had to work outside of being an actress. I mean, she was able to sustain a career and work consistently, even though it wasn't roles that she favored at the beginning, because it wound up being the stereotypical, what you said, Maria, Conchita, Pepita, janky pig type of roles. But again, she was working all the time. Okay. And, when you win an Oscar, which she did for West Side Story, you think that would give you more opportunities for better roles. But in her case, it didn't. They just offered her more of the same Spitfire and not quite as good as her Anita and West Side Story roles. And she said, forget it. I don't want to do this. Plus, she had some personal stuff going on, too. So she didn't work for like 7 years. People forget that because there weren't any good roles offered to her in films. She did do Broadway. She starred in Lorraine Hansberry's. She worked in one of her plays, and she worked with Robert Shaw in a version of Elmer Gantry. So she did Broadway. But as far as films, it wasn't until Marlon Brando offered her a role in The Night of the Following Day, which wasn't a very good film, but that brought her back. And then after that, she did Carnal Knowledge for Mike Nichols. And then her career kind of took off all over again. And then she went back to Broadway and played that crazy, character Googie Gomez in The Ritz. And she did the film version. And then, she did television. So, she's legendary career.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I remember television.
Yeah.
The electric company.
The electric company, exactly. Yeah.
Who's that lady?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so she's, incredible. And then to now appear in the new version of West Side Story, I think must have been the icing on the cake for her,
Yeah.
Be working with Spielberg, wow.
And it was just such a high quality, performance and production together. She really, almost stole the film, I felt like. In talking about representation like that, how you want to keep your honor and do a role that you feel proud of. I mean, are there films that stand out to you, especially in the studio age, is having good representation that the actors could be proud of the role that they had?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have Dolores Del Rio in Flying Down to Rio. You have Antonio Moreno in The Silent. He worked with Clara Bow in The It Girl. I mean, you have Ramon Navarro. He starred in the movie that really stabilized MGM economically and made it the #1 studio, which was Ben-Hur in 1926. Gilbert Roland also started in The Silence, and his career went right through up until the 80s, okay? And he always played the dashing adventurer in movie after movie, or the best friend of the leading man. Gosh, there's so many. Lupe Velez, okay, who's now known as the Mexican Spitfire, best known today, but she had a long career. I mean, she had a phenomenal career. She worked with everybody. She worked with Cecil B. DeMille. She worked with D.W. Griffith in his last his last film. I mean, she worked with the Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney. William Wyler. She has an incredible. She worked with Laurel and Hardy.
That's right.
So her career really needs to be reevaluated, because people just know her from the Mexican Spitfire, which was great characterization for her. She played the excitable Carmelita Fuentes, and she spoke in Spanish. So even though American audiences would go, "Oh, that's gibberish," but she would throw out one-liners in Spanish that Spanish-speaking audiences would really, laugh and crack up with, because it was almost like her inside jokes. And actually, her characterization I think, was maybe the unconscious inspiration for people like Fran Drescher's The Nanny. Because
yes,
she kind of takes that ethnic Bronx tough girl persona, as also Sofia Vergara's, on Modern Family. That kind of ethnic, regional persona that really comes across very strong, I think, has its roots in Lupe Velez.
Oh, I see that.
Because the Mexican Spitfire wasn't even thought of as a series. They made 7 Spitfire films, but it started out as a single movie called The Girl from Mexico. And it was so popular. I mean, they had lines around the block to see that movie, that somebody at RKO said, "Oh man, we got to turn this into a series." Because usually in those days, if they did a film series, it was based on either a comic character from the newspaper like Blondie, or Charlie Chan, or that kind of thing, or a radio personality character. So for them to start off with a character in an original film and spin that off into a series was really something that wasn't really done at that time.
Well, I've got good news for you. There is a biography coming out of Lupe Velez. Eve Golden, rather prolific biographer, is releasing a book. Seems to have given a great deal of care. So I think that that's going to be something good to see.
Oh, looking forward to it then.
Yes,
Yeah.
I am too. I can't wait to read it.
Oh, because I think if she had lived, I don't want to go into the particulars of her passing, but if Lupe had lived, I think she would have gone on to television, like I said, and created that persona for television. So instead of I Love Lucy, you might have had I Love Lupe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I could see that. She was almost born for that sort of a format, if you think about it. Which artists, I mean, you've talked about a lot of people here. Are there any that you feel are kind of underseen, underknown from that period?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the girl from Casablanca, okay, Nina Brandel, okay, the girl who wanted the Bulgarian girl that wanted her letters of transit,
Oh, yes.
okay, real sweet and innocent. Well, she's Latina. Her name is Joy Page. Her father was an actor from New Mexico, Latino. Uh, his name was Don Page. Yes, with that was his name, Don Page, but he was Mexican American. But when he came to L.A., he changed his name because the Latin Lover was really popular. So he changed his name to Don Alvarado. Okay, that's what happened. Anyway, so Joy Page is his daughter, and she worked in Casablanca in that role, and she went on to other films as well. Uh, so those are some of the unrecognized people. They always talk about Casablanca, but they never talk about her. The gentleman who did the models for King Kong was a gentleman by the name of Marcel Delgado. I mean, he worked for Willis O'Brien, who discovered him at an art school, but it was Marcel Delgado that actually did the models, did the giant hand, did the giant head of King Kong that appeared to be full size on the screen, and also the background scenic artists, because in those days there was no CGI. They had to paint the backgrounds on glass and they would photograph it so it looks like Kong is running through the jungle. Well, those scenic paintings were done by a Mexican American. His name was Mario Larinaga. Okay. And he worked at RKO and he went on to do Citizen Kane. When you see Xanadu, Citizen Kane's house, that he made it look so big. That's Mario Larinaga's work. So, I mean, one of the popular movies now is Elvis. Well, if you ever watched Jailhouse Rock, that musical number, Jailhouse Rock, it was choreographed by a Latino, Alex Romero, because at MGM they said, "Oh, let's choreograph this," and the choreographers that were there said, "Oh, but Alex said, no, no, no," because they were trying to do a Gene Kelly type of choreography.
Oh, no.
And Alex said, no, it's not going to work for Elvis. So he just asked Elvis, what do you do on stage when you're performing? What are your moves? And Elvis showed him. And Alex said, okay, well, and he figured it out, and he incorporated Elvis's moves and gave him background dancers. And, it's a classic cinema moment. The Jailhouse Rock musical sequence. And another Hollywood icon that is now being portrayed by a Latina, okay, which is Ana de Armas, is playing the most iconic Hollywood actress ever, Marilyn Monroe. Well, part of the Marilyn Monroe image was etched by a Latino, William Bill Trevilla, who was a costume designer. Okay, he helped to etch that image of Marilyn by the wardrobe that she used in her films. And he won an Oscar. He not only did women, he also costumed men. He won an Oscar in 1949 for The Adventures of Don Juan, in which he costumed Errol Flynn. Okay. So, I mean, those are some of the unsung, unrecognized people. I could go on, but
And that's the beauty of your book is there's a lot of more, well-known, well-celebrated stars, but all of these people that you have mentioned are included in your book, and you really treat all of them like the stars and the important people that they are. I think that's a real value of this book.
yeah, and Latinos didn't work in a vacuum.
Right.
We worked with everybody.
Yes.
And everybody worked with us. I mean, it wasn't so that's really important. We worked with everybody.
Right. I mean, instrumental.
Absolutely. And as part of the Hollywood film industry, I don't think people realize that it's part of the whole story of Hollywood. Okay. People don't realize that, let's say, Billy Wilder, okay, he's probably known for the best American film comedies, yet he mastered the English language because he's a German emigre. Okay, people don't realize that. William Wyler as well, top director. One of the fathers of the Hollywood was an Englishman by the name of Charlie Chaplin. So many people contribute. Marlene Dietrich, German. Anna May Wong, Chinese American. Everybody contributed to what we call Hollywood today. And I think it's part of a greater story. It's a story really of America. It's a story of immigrants. It's a story of the mythologizing of America, of Hollywood, entertainment, and an art form as well.
I feel like this is a quality that makes Hollywood special. Part of the reason why those films are valued so much all over the whole world, really, is that it incorporates the whole world in some respects.
And that's what a lot of the old timers, they didn't realize. Like you and I go to an office or to a factory to work, to these people, it was just a job. Some people had higher artistic aspirations, obviously.
Right.
But for a lot of people, it was just a job where they went to work, except that their factory was the dream factory, which was Hollywood, was a studio. But some people later on, when I talked to them, they were surprised that anyone would be interested in their careers.
Yeah.
Because they just saw it as work, as a job. They didn't see the significance. They didn't realize that movies would still be around and people would be talking about them and years later.
Mm-hmm. So it provided a living.
Yeah.
That's what it was about.
Exactly.
Well, before I let you go, I want to know, I mean, you've been a part of this story for so long. You wrote your Hispanics in Hollywood book about a couple decades ago, and then now here you are with Viva Hollywood. Over the years, you've seen a lot of changes in the industry. So I just want to know, where do you think we are now? Like, has there been an improvement?
Absolutely, there is an improvement. I don't know if we're close where we need to be now. But in terms of theatrical motion pictures, no, we're lagging behind. Okay, there have been changes. There have been improvements, just what I mentioned. Ana de Armas playing Marilyn Monroe. Even though I don't deal with it, but on television, you have Jay Hernandez, a young actor, playing Magnum. Okay, they don't try to make him Latino. They don't try to make him Hawaiian. He's just an actor playing a role, just as Tom Selleck would be playing the role. So I think there's a young man by the name of Tanakh Huerta, who's playing a Mayan submariner in the new Wakanda Forever. And he started out playing he's from Mexico in the series Narcos. Okay. So, Penelope Cruz, there's so many people. I mean, some of the most beautiful actresses and women in the world are Latinas. I mean, Penelope Cruz, Jennifer Lopez, Selma Hayek, Zoe Saldana. I mean, so there are certainly a lots of improvements that are going on. but there still needs work to be done. And now the line is blurring between theatrical motion pictures. The line is blurring between theatrical motion pictures, streaming, television, cable. I think that is where the biggest impact is. Latinos are working all over the place in Latino and non-Latino roles in all of these new media platforms. I think motion pictures, theatrical motion pictures, were still lagging behind, but in all other areas, I think we are working.
Yes, you're seeing it in front of the camera for sure.
And now we're defining our own image as part of the Hollywood experience. Perhaps the most important filmmaker, Latino filmmaker, is Robert Rodriguez. He's given opportunities. He's changed the way we look at things with like Spy Kids movies, Desperado. Like you said, it's about Spy Kids is about a Latino family that happens to be spies. Mm-hmm. As he said, as Robert Rodriguez said, you don't have to be English or British to like James Bond. It's right. About the characters. Okay. So I think he is probably the most important of today, even though we have people like Luis Valdez, who did La Bamba, Gregory Nava, who did Mi Familia, Patricia Cardozo, who did Real Women Have Curves, Patricia Regan, who did the 33. Mexican filmmakers have impacted Hollywood, but they're from Mexico and they have a different sensibility. I mean, they're brilliant artists, don't get me wrong, but they're not American Latinos. So they have I said, their experience is a little different.
And I think that coming from another country, well, I'm just thinking somebody like Pedro Menderes or Cari Gerardo, it seemed like they had a little more respect coming over here, even if their roles weren't quite as juicy as they were in Mexico, because they were big stars in Mexico. So they came here as foreign stars. But
they were still restrained.
Yeah.
Pedro Armendariz could play any role in Mexico. Mm-hmm. He comes to the United States and he's John Wayne's best friend in Fort Apache. Yeah. Okay. He's not a leading man. Okay. Katy Jurado, the same thing. She made a spectacular debut, even though it wasn't really her debut, but it was a spectacular role in High Noon. Mm-hmm. And she worked, but every other part, she played an Indian woman or not Indian, Native American or Mexican woman.
That's true.
Juicy roles.
Yes.
But they were all along the same parameter. Dolores Del Rio. In Mexico, she could play any part. Mm-hmm. Glamorous lady that she was. When she's invited back to Hollywood in the late 50s, early 60s, what does she get to play? Another Native woman. Granted, she played Elvis Presley's Native American mother, or in John Ford's Cheyenne Autumn, she played another Native American. But she did a great film called La Otra, The Other, which was about twin sisters, one good, one bad. Okay? She could have done the English language version easily. But when they did the English language version, what happened? It was called Dead Ringer, and Betty Davis played the role.
Mm-hmm. So I guess just one more thing. What would you like people to know about your book? What do you want them to have top of mind when they're picking up this book?
To have a good time, to read maybe a little memorabilia, get a little knowledge and information about the people that you saw on the screen. If you're a young person, maybe realize that it didn't just start with Edward James Olmos and Andy Garcia and Jennifer Lopez, that there's a whole history behind them, the people that they are walking on their shoulders. So I think it's just a fun look, and it's also informative and gives you a perspective on all of the people that contributed to this great industry that is so part of our popular culture, which is Hollywood.
Well, it accomplishes all those goals. I have to say, it's gorgeous. It's full of information, and it really was fun to read. It's so accessible. So I really appreciate your work on this, and I appreciate you coming to talk to me today.
Oh, well, I enjoy talking movies, and especially with someone who knows, and also with a beautiful audience that listens to you, and you can share this information with people. So it's great.
For more information, including how to find Luis's books, go to watchingclassicmovies.com. Like the show? Please rate and review on Apple, and tell your friends. I appreciate your support. Thank you for listening. This is Kendall Krufer, watching classic movies. Until next time.